Being an all-terrain vehicle, it naturally has some rust, so I grinded as much as I could in the first instance. Now I'm gonna use the finer grinding tool and get rid of the rest of the rust. And I will reconstruct this with either fiberglass reinforced material filler or a bicomponent epoxy. Here unfortunately is broken, and I will have to clean up perfectly this section and make an adaptation with some metal brackets or of some sort. I will see, so that the rear spoiler could actually have a chance to snap in position, bolt in position. I will also have to clean up the rust in this section. It's all superficial. The material is very good. Same here. The material is perfect. There are some holes. Yep, there is a hole. It's covered by masking tape on the other side, so that dust doesn't fill the inside of the car. I will grind up everything and then reconstruct that section as well. Here I'm not so sure that I will reconstruct this part, but I will clean it up nonetheless. Whoever owned this car before me actually did a pretty good job with this material that actually protected the wheel arches from getting rust. I will remove this plastic part as well. There's a lot of dust falling, and there is some rust hiding in that section. It's all superficial, but I will have to clean it up nonetheless. I initially thought about replacing the rear spoiler, plastic spoiler, with a solid steel metal bar, but I'm not sure that I could afford any traffic fines just for looks. I managed to clean this section with a coarse grinding tool and then a fine grinding tool. Finally, I applied a coating of Coroplex stuff. This is a rust converter that can be filled later on with epoxy or fiberglass material. I will do the inner section later on because I have to remove the wheel first, and I'll have to move the car into a different position and then install standers so that I can safely remove the wheel. And the rear section I will do together with the rust under the rear spoiler plastic bar, and this is a job for another day. But first I will handle this section. I will wait around 3 hours and then I will reconstruct. So I applied the first layer of epoxy, then I sandblasted it, and then I added the first layer of fiberglass filler, and I'm gonna sandblast it again and then add the second layer of filler and the third one up until the entire section is smooth, and then I'm gonna paint it. Now I am also removing the rust on the inside of the wheel arch, so I began to remove the rust on the inside. There's still a lot, so I'll continue removing the rust, clean up as much as I can, and then cut the dead metal, and finally I will reconstruct this section. Also, I started removing the rust on this part of the car. As you can see, there was quite a bit of rust, but the metal is in very good condition. See, solid. So the rust was all superficial. Well, I applied a couple of layers and the results are pretty good. The first being the epoxy and then 2 layers of fiberglass reinforced filler. Then I cleaned this section up as much as I could mechanically up until that part, and I will treat it with Coroplex And then this is a rust converter, and then I will paint it and then apply the material that protects the paint like it was originally on the car. I also cleaned this section as much as I could. I cut parts of the old metal, broken metal, and I will apply now the rust converter, and then I'll begin filling the holes. I will apply one more layer of this coarse filler, and then I will apply the lower grain filler that will eventually level up the third layer. It's beginning to look good and pretty much level. I also added the rust converter, and it reacted with the remaining rust in the metal. And I did the same on the top section. I'll wait for it to settle. Let's see how many holes there are. But since the rust won't be reactive, I don't see any reason why the repair wouldn't hold. At least a couple of years, and then I'll probably cut the entire section and weld a new metal part in place. But so far, pretty happy with the results. I'm gonna sandblast this entire section, then reconstruct this part. Finally, we'll apply the fine grain filler and complete the paint job. Of course, this section is not visible since it's under the plastic part, but it's good to fix it anyway. Then I will attack this section. In fact, now I'm gonna remove the rear bumper. Well, bummer. The rear bumper just disintegrated when I removed it. Was kind of expected. I'll source a new one and replace it because this is beyond repair. Thankfully, the rest of the metal parts are in pretty good condition. Except for the armature, the metal armature of the rear bumper, which is totally busted. I will remove the remains of the rear metal bumper. It's so crusty that it's beyond salvage, and it's missing some parts. Then I'll source a new rear bumper and mount it in place. Unfortunately, there is more rust revealed in the lower section of the fenders, the rear fenders, which I will address today. I cut the crusty, rusty metal parts with the Dremel cutting disc, and then I polished with some sandpaper with the Dremel as well. And now I'm gonna apply the Coraplex rust converter. After that, I will reconstruct most of these sections with fiberglass mesh and epoxy. Otherwise, the fender looks good. On the rear side it looks good as well. There were a couple of rusty points which I cleaned, and I will repaint them. But then there is this section that has to be cut. I started cutting with a small disc through the bolt and will eventually complete the cut. That's tedious. The bar armature disintegrated, and I began cutting a linear shape here so that I can remove this bolt. I also cut it from the other side, but the disc is way too small, so the space is way too small, so the disc doesn't fit. So here I did the same, and it worked just fine. Now I will clean this entire section with the wire brush, and then with the cleaning disc, and after that I will apply rust in converter, and then I will paint it. Here are the remains, the rusty remains, and the chassis as well. A total mess. Now it's very interesting how and why the bar armature rusted so badly, and this whole metal section is pretty much perfect. I'll remove the coupling hook and we'll clean this section as well. I also added some material to reinforce this section of the metal frame, and I will continue to do so that I will fill up this section completely. Now, moving on to this side, I applied the fiberglass mesh, and now I'm gonna add the bicomponent epoxy. So far I applied the bicomponent epoxy to this section of the wing. Also, I progressed a bit on the inside, not much, but better than it was. Well, now working on the rear left wing wheel arch, and I sandblasted this section. Now I'm gonna apply some rust converter to get rid of all these small points, and then I will apply the paint. You can see there are some smaller rust points that I cannot reach with either the wire brush or the blasting tool. Then this section right here has some rust as well. I tried to clean as much as I could, but unfortunately there's more that I'm gonna address with the Dremel. Then this section of the wheel arch, then I will move on to this section, which I started to clean. Yeah. And I added a piece of rag in that tube so that the rust dust doesn't enter, since I also started to clean the rust inside. Then this part right here was very rusty, and I cleaned it with a wire brush. I'm gonna clean it some more and then apply rust converter. Making progress. This section is now ready to be painted. The thing looks pretty okay. It's better than nothing. When I will have my own garage, I will do a better job. But up until then, I will have to protect the entire the entire wheel arch, so that further rust won't make its way and eat throughout the metal. So the repair is pretty much complete for now. I will have to address this section, but for that I will have to remove the side step and this plastic ornament. The same for the lower section here. As a bonus, I cleaned the interior of this part, which was very rusty. I don't know what this is or what it's called, but I cleaned it with a wire brush and then applied the rust converter. There is a bit of rust here. I would clean this eventually. I should have done it in this session, but somehow I missed it. So I will address this. I'm advancing with the epoxy in the reconstruction of the rear left fender, and this is the initial result. This is the first layer. I want to let it dry out and then apply a second layer to level everything and then paint. So far I painted this section of the left rear wing arch and also on the inside. I think it looks good so far. This is the first layer, and I'm gonna apply a second layer once this will dry. The left rear arch is ready for paint. I cleaned everything with isopropyl alcohol and then with some paint thinner. There are still traces of the paint thinner. I'm waiting for it to dry, and then I will apply the final layer of coat of paint. Final layer for this autumn, that is, because next year in the summer I'm planning to apply another coat, investigate the outcome throughout the winter, and then repair if needed and apply another coat. So I applied the layer of paint on the rear left wheel arch, and I think the results are pretty promising. In any case, it's better than it was before. And then I added some masking tape and did a pretty messy job here. I painted this section of the rear fender, the edge of the fender, the metallic part, and this section I will address it in the next couple of days. I will also paint this part. I de-rusted it with the wire brush and then applied some rust converter. There is still some rust inside the screw holes, the bolt holes, but I will address that with the Dremel and a very fine steel brush after I will paint it, at the moment when I will install the hook. Okay, and I will paint now only up until here, the entire section of this part, and up until here. The rest is in pretty good condition. There is some superficial rust which I'm gonna address next year. Since it's pretty cold, today is like 15 degrees, yesterday were like 6 or maybe less. This is the first layer of paint on this part. It's beginning to be a bit cold outside, so hopefully the paint will cure. It's mid-autumn and the rear bar for my Nissan Patrol has arrived. It's a genuine part, new, OEM, made in Japan. And the name is Reinforce Comp, which I believe it's complete. Part number is 85010-VD200. These are pretty hard to find, but if you really need one, I suggest you focus your attention to the United Arab Emirates. That's no joke, they really like Nissan Patrols there. And that's where I get mine from. Transportation fee was a premium, but given the scarcity of these parts and the fact that I couldn't locate one in my country, neither new nor second-hand, as almost everything that I've seen were completely rusted, like my old bar. There are some factory defects or handling defects, like this, also here, and these parts, these sections will rust immediately during winter time when there's gonna be a lot of salt on the roads. But I will just rectify these with some paint, and then once it will dry, I might as well think of even respraying this part, even though it doesn't need such an operation. But given the scarcity, I repeat myself, I would probably respray it with a thick layer of primer and then another thick layer of paint, just to protect it. I mean, the transportation fees were like double the cost for this bar. Thus you get the point. So there it is, the new bar. On the interior it looks okay. There are no scratches. But on the edge, like here and also here, I will rectify these minor scuffs with paint. I cleaned the screws as best as I could, and now I'm gonna mount them. Since it's way too cold outside and I'm not gonna really use the Patrol this winter, I will assemble the bar and let it like this in the garage. And next year in spring I'm gonna apply some vinegar solution over these screws and then perform a better cleaning. This is the part that I painted previously. It turned out pretty good. There's some superficial rust inside these screw holes. Yeah, I'm gonna paint the entire bar in the spring. And this is the part where the screws are gonna mount to the intermediary piece that will hold the bar in place. And it's the same on the other side. I applied some rust converter and it turned out pretty black, so there was quite some dust. In the spring I'm gonna clean everything with a thin wire brush and then apply roughly rust converter and then spray paint, because my painting tool doesn't fit there. The bar is mounted and it looks perfect. It looks perfect. And my initial repair on the left wheel arch. Pretty proud of it. And of the interior. It looks great. Great. The intermediary repair looks like this. It's pretty even, and I haven't sandblasted anything yet. I'm gonna use some thicker grit first, and then water and P800, something like this, maybe even finer, and sandblast everything to be in line with the metal. It's looking a bit sad, but I am putting a break to the Patrol for this year, so I'm gonna paint it so that the rust won't eat any more of the wheel arch, and then in the spring I'm gonna sandblast the paint and the eventual rust and whatnot, and do the job as I did on the other side of the car.